Welcome back to episode 4 of WTSF, where I answer your questions from Reddit/StreetFighter with in-game examples. I find the common themes on Reddit, you vote for which ones you want to hear more about, and then I answer questions that match that theme. This week, what you'd like to see most is advice for beginner Street Fighter V characters, a very popular topic. If you'd like to take part in these polls, they appear every Friday on my Twitter, so if you follow @BehindTheWires or @TheHairFGC, links in the description, you can get involved with those. From Z Gordon, returning player looking for a character. Hello, I'm a returning player at this game. I recently bought the Champion Edition and I'm a bit overwhelmed by the roster at this point. I'm looking for a character who meets the following or most of the following criteria. Has a high damage per attack, is not very reliant on longer combos to win, ideally has an easy conversion into CA, is not a charge character, is not primarily a grappler. I used to main Ryu in Street Fighter 4 and I think in 5 he would probably fit most of these criteria from what I know. And I also want to look at alternatives. Anyway, I'd greatly appreciate some input. I picked this question because it's actually listed a criteria that I think is common with a lot of new players. One thing I really like in the Tekken community is that they've came together and made a bunch of charts like this where it's really clear to see which characters are easy to pick up and learn the game with. I still stand by what I've always said with Street Fighter V, which is whoever you think is cool is going to be a perfectly fine character to learn the game with. There's nothing particularly difficult about anybody in the game. That said, let's actually give it a go and see if we can create something like this, and I'll show you some examples in the game along the way as well. So working backwards through the criteria, let's take a look. So first things first, no grapplers. There's a lot of reasons why people wouldn't necessarily want to deal with grapplers. As a learning character, grapplers do require a very different mindset in a lot of senses. For starters, you've got to actually have a very good understanding of the opponent quite often. Things are going to vary from matchup to matchup, and sometimes that requires a lot of manipulation of the frame data as well. And then shorter combos and things like that as well, so not necessarily as fun for a lot of people to play as. I personally really enjoy grapplers, but they're not for everyone, that's for sure. Right, so that's grapplers removed from the list. I've been quite aggressive there, and I've removed hybrid grapplers as well as full-on grapplers. If you are interested in that stuff, hang on until about the midpoint of this episode. I'm going to include some grappler stuff in there. But by and large, all of these characters do require to think about command throws. Sometimes it's just certain versions of them. So charge characters, not everyone's a big fan of those either. The fact that you've got to tether yourself to one spot while you're charging moves and things like that. Also the timing of moves, it can be quite off-putting to pick up one of these characters first. So I completely understand why. Again, it shouldn't stop you. If you do like any of the charge characters, don't be put off by the input method. It is pretty simple to pick up once you learn. So it's a shame, but we'll now remove the charge characters. Starting to see some doubles up here. Now that next point about having easy conversions into critical art, most characters do actually have plenty of critical art cancelable options. They're not always apparent by looking at the trials. However, if you look at your frame data apps, you'll find a bunch of options in there. So when it comes to ruling out characters on here that don't have good critical art confirms, I'm going to leave it as it is. I just think that there's plenty of options there if you're willing to pick some things up. The next piece of criteria there was not very reliant on long combos to win, and that one can shave a couple off here. I'm going to assume that not reliant on longer combos also means not reliant on complex combos or having to adjust your combos depending on where in the screen you are and things like that. So that rules out a few extra characters as well, including Akuma, interestingly, who is quite a simple character, but I'm going to do it anyway. So with the grappler characters removed and the charge characters removed, you would think that there's just one type left now, which would be the motion style characters that have quarter circles and dragon punch motions, that Z motion. But there's actually kind of a couple of others that still exist, and Falcon Ed are two good examples of that. So these characters just have like multiple button presses there. You see I press 2 kicks and a special attack happens. This also means that you have a 1-button dragon punch, which is super useful there by just pressing all punches. So you can see here that these characters very much so have the execution barrier in mind, and they're very simple to pick up. Some of these characters also have special moves that just require to hold a button down and then you let go of it. Others let you mash buttons in order for things to come out. So yeah, if you want really straightforward execution, these are the characters for you. Lastly, the high damage per attack criteria. There are some exceptions, but most characters in this game require 3 to 4 correct decisions per round in order to secure that round for themselves. So yeah, there's nothing really there that you need to worry about. Weaker, more defensive characters like Chun-Li would have fitted into that category, but they've already been removed through the charge character criteria and other things. So that leaves you with quite a lot of characters still. So you've got Kage there, Falk, Rashid, and then further along there you've got Ryu, Ken, Kami, Cody, Poison, Sakura, Ed, Juri, Ibuki, Karen, Nash, Sagat, and Lucia. As you've mentioned already, one particular character that you liked in the past was Ryu, so we also have the characters known as Shotos. Shoto is the affectionate nickname for the characters that come from the Ansatsuken saga, who all roughly know a form of Shotokan karate, which means a completely different thing in the real world, but in the Street Fighter world that means that they've got a fireball, a dragon punch, and a tornado kick of some type. The only ones I'd say to be careful with here are Kage and Akuma, who have a little bit of combo complexity in there, and also they've got quite low life bars and quite low tolerance to stun, which means you'll get stunned more frequently and knocked out more frequently, and all in all that learning process can get a bit more frustrating because you will be losing more often in order to learn. But as I've said before in videos like this, none of these characters are off the table. If you particularly like one of these characters, just learn them. When it comes to learning, there's not a huge amount of depth or complexity here, so just pick one up and just see how you do. Next question by Rework OC, currently wanna cry. Please don't cry, Rework, we'll get you through this. Hi there, I'm new to Street Fighter 5 because my friend convinced me to get it, and I'm playing Rashid but having trouble playing against people who just sit at one side of the map and spam fireball. Any help or tips would be appreciated. I'm new to fighting games in general, so I also might just be bad. So one thing you're gonna have to learn no matter which character you pick up is how to deal with a few things, and all characters deal with these things differently. The first one is how to actually navigate a load of fireballs being thrown at you. No matter which character you pick up, they can all do a couple of things in this scenario. First thing you can do is obviously the Street Fighter 2 approach of just walking forwards when there's no fireballs, blocking when there is fireballs. So sometimes that will require a little bit of patience, but you'll get there. Other thing you can do is neutral jump, and you see there that a punch came out, and that punch came out because there was still a fireball on the screen. You can only have one fireball on at any one time, so by neutral jumping you're actually guaranteeing a little bit of time on the screen to walk forwards. If they get predictable, you can actually jump over the fireball as well. The thing to bear in mind there is if they're throwing fireballs, they're probably expecting you to jump forwards at some point, and they'll be waiting with an anti-air, so be very careful with that. Only do it if they're falling into really predictable loops. And the last thing, a lot of fireballs are actually punishable on block. Now for the more interesting bit, what can your character do specifically that allows them to navigate fireballs? A lot of characters have additional tools to help them deal with these problems. So Rashid, for example, there can roll through using his V-Skill 1. If that lets you in range, you can actually do a kick off that. And that big non-directional V-Skill also allows for you to move around the screen a little bit when you're being zoned out. Rashid can also change trajectory in the air, which allows him to get past fireballs a lot easier than other characters. Some characters like Mika here can slide under them, and also have grounded options by armoring up and going straight through the fireball itself. But more on Mika soon. Again, just check your character's frame data for certain things like projectile invincibility and armor to find out more about that. Question 3 by Mainster. How are grapplers supposed to be played? Every time I get a grappler, I just have no idea what the heck I'm supposed to do. The only time I can actually land a grab is when I manage to knock them down, so I can meaty it. If we're in neutral, there's basically zero chance I'm landing any grab. Only exception is Laura's EX grab, since she does a rush, which helps a lot. Any other situation, and by the time my grab is about to go off, I'm hit by some. But when I watch games, people land grabs in neutral all the time. What are those people doing to be able to get those grabs? In my experience, they're constantly getting stuffed by my opponent throwing out moves. So as I alluded to earlier on today, there's certain things that you can do as a grappler that require a bit of a different mindset. In this game in particular, a lot of that comes around from the concept of 50-50s. Quite often you're trying to set up these instances of making them block because you're +2, +3, and this forces them to guess. So +2 with Mika, she's got a 5-frame command throw or a 5-frame medium punch, which means that they have to decide, do they block or do they actually get out of the way of the command throw? And if they pick that wrong, they can actually be in a bad scenario either way. This guessing mentality is one of the things that people don't like about playing grapplers or playing against grapplers. But if you get the hang of it, it's a really fun way to play. So the general game plan is to play quite aggressively, encourage blocking and defensive play, and then when they go defensive, you start throwing. Quite often they have V-trigger things that will actually make the opponent super defensive as well. It should also be seen with normals from the opponent as an opportunity to dash up and get some frame advantage as well. But that's it in general, really. Create 50-50 scenarios, create defensive scenarios, and take advantage of any hesitation from them mid-screen. Any opportunity to actually get right up in their face is generally something that you want to capitalize on. And yeah, keep them guessing. Shut down any keep away options they've got. Learn to navigate keep away as well. And yeah, find times to move in. But yeah, unlike the first person that was asking questions, welcome to the club. Grapplers are a lot of fun once you get into them. Just bear in mind you're going to upset some people along the way. Fourth question by Jake the Snake 28. Brilliant name. Complete Street Fighter 5 noob looking for some advice. I have a plethora of fighting game experience, Mortal Kombat, Tekken, Soul Calibur, Dead or Alive, etc. However, Street Fighter 5 was one of the ones I never really took seriously until now. I remember back in the day when my older brother and I would play the PS2 version of the 20th anniversary edition. Growing up, my favourites were always Cammy and Vega, but looking through the roster, I don't recognise half the roster. I also don't understand what these V skills are. Any advice or tips would be helpful. So hopefully my wonderful art skills have helped illustrate that a little bit there. But yeah, we have a lot of new characters. The purple ones are probably the ones that you remember the most there, which is going to be the original 8 characters plus the 4 boss characters, plus any World Warrior style characters from Street Fighter 2 era. Also Ryu and Ken there in red from the first game, and Sagat, who obviously carried over. In terms of who's been added since then, there's a lot of original characters in Street Fighter 5. We'll go into a couple of them in a second. There are a lot of characters that were added in 3 and 4 and 5 who have now been included in here as DLC. But you can see that it's got a really good spread of characters off all of the different games in 5, which a lot of people see as a good thing. Some of their moves have changed a little bit along the way and things like that, so if you do remember some of these, it's definitely worth picking up the trials and practicing with them just to see what's changed. Vega Claw, for example, does have a lot of mechanics and moves that are very exclusive to how he plays in Street Fighter 5. So first thing you'll notice with Claw here is he has motion moves, so he's not exactly the same as he was in previous Street Fighter games there. You're going to have to use quarter circles and things like that to attack with. He can also equip and unequip his claw. This allows him to get different ranges, different attack data, and while he's got his claw off, he's got access to command throws. The V system itself breaks down into 3 components. You've got the V skills, V triggers, and V reversals. V skills are extra moves that you've got by pushing your medium buttons together. Claw gets certain types of invincibility here, and he does a little pirouette in one version of his. V triggers tend to give your character an additional offensive or defensive option. In some cases, they'll allow you to extend combos or make unsafe things into safe things just by how they affect the frame data. As mentioned before, a big part of this game is building up your V-trigger and managing it well. And lastly, V-reversals is when on block you respond with whatever your V-reversal input is while you're blocking, and it just allows you to get some space back for the cost of one of your V-trigger bars. This means that, again, having to manage the resource, you're going to have to decide when it's best to get yourself out of a scenario. Quite often this means that if they're going to do something that puts them as plus on block, you will use it to get away from that scenario so that you're not the one getting 50-50. All these things feature quite a lot in Street Fighter 5, so you're going to want to learn how all of them work. But if you've used to play any of these characters before, you're going to have to learn what's changed about them, but also how these new systems complement them. Last one here by username Moose, YouTube videos. Does anybody know of a good YouTube channel or channels for beginner knowledge or just useful information? So as I've shown before, if you click on resources here and scroll down on r/StreetFighter, you'll find loads of information. But one of the things here, if you are going to learn a new character, beginner character, whatever it happens to be, is if you scroll down far enough, you'll see here Street Fighter 5 characters and moves lists. You'll find everything that you need to know about these characters in here. Not only that, you will also find their discords and things like that, so you can speak to like-minded people who play the same characters as you. So yeah, go on those things, make friends, and learn your character. And that is it for episode 4 of WTSF. Any links to any of these questions, any of the resources that I've mentioned during this episode will be in the description. And yeah, have a good one.